let's discuss the Okotok man. On May 26, 2026, a man originating from Okotok was begun an investigation in January 2026, which upon discovering through the province-wide ICE system, the police essentially found this individual possessing 500,000 plus photos and videos of child exploitive content. As of June 3rd, this particular individual was released from custody and is awaiting trial August 8th. Now that gives this individual 2 months within civilization up until that particular trial. And I'm not necessarily a particular, you could say, individual that might be of a vigilante nature, but allow me to place this analysis for you. As a Canadian system, as a Canadian justice system, allow me to play devil's advocate for one particular video, if you wish, if I may use you, whomever you may be, as an example regarding the particular nature of the self. Imagine if you do one thing, and that one thing leads to that one thing becoming a pattern. Let's imagine that particular thing, such as working out, as an example. Imagine if I work out 500,000 times. You'd think that I would be rather fit, right? The adaptation of the continuous stimulation of working out would result in me being rather good at, say, working out 500,000 times. Now let's imagine it from the perspective of a sex offender, which said sex offender has possession of over 500,000 videos and photos of child exploitative sexual videos, which from May 26, upon their conclusion, the Alberta or federal government essentially, because once again, federal jurisdiction oversees provincial jurisdiction, when it comes to the overall crime laws. All laws are from a federal perspective. It is up to the province and then the municipal and the districts that which then further enforce these particular laws. Now allow me to place this particular analysis. Imagine this individual has not just one particular record, but 500,000. You would imagine he's rather good at what he does. You'd imagine that he's an individual that has done this so many times that he is in himself a, you could say, perfect predator. And in being that perfect predator, what do you think is going to happen? I'm not inviting individuals to go seek vigilante activity towards said individual, but I'm simply placing this analysis from the psychological devil's advocate, which I am currently playing. In the comparison, imagine if, say, I do 500,000 push-ups. I'm going to develop said skills that result in the strength, on and on and on, a physical adaptation. But when you look at psychological behavior or repetitive patterns, you might imagine that repetitive patterns would incite a repetitive pattern in themselves, especially if that repetitive pattern has occurred 500,000 times. Ultimately, I'm driving the fear behind this particular individual, which as a civilization, we need to essentially, I would argue, this individual is a 500,000 time repeat offender. He was only once found and arrested, which upon the ICE department specifically pinpointing these particular videos after Camrose specific students reported being sent videos of child mutilations. The videos are directly linked to this individual, which through the ICE, we then see the department has once again placed and found this individual guilty of containing 500,000 videos and photos of content of that particular nature. The individual was released June 3rd, which means he didn't even stay in jail for more than 7 days and is now awaiting trial. Now, allow me to place this devil's advocate, essentially. This individual has 2 months free in society. He may not necessarily be allowed around children's spaces and must remain 50 meters from children's spaces. Now, as an individual or a father at this particular point, you might have a particular burning feeling in your chest upon hearing that statement. As a mother, you might be worried sick about the fact that this Canadian justice system is not holding the values of its people. Allow me to place it from this one particular analogy. I myself, a former arrested individual for specifically causing one fight that would ultimately change the trajectory of my entire life. Arrested for psychiatric treatment, and for the last 12 years you might find I've been paying the price of that punishment, which didn't allow me, upon my being arrested for one fight, I've suffered 12 years of punishment. The brutality of the fight or the nature of the fight is what ultimately led to the punishment. From one fight, they stopped a particular repetitive pattern from occurring, which 12 years later, I am here today to speak to you regarding the justice system of Canada. In Canada, an individual such as myself may have had one fight 12 years ago, which the punishment is still ongoing. Whereas an individual guilty of being found to have 500,000 photos and videos of child sexual exploitive nature, and in this content found in his possession, he was only kept for 7 days and released back within the society. Now this is in Okotok. And ultimately this individual has repeated his offense 500,000 times, containing 500,000 photos and videos. You'd imagine after 500,000 repetitive actions, the depth of which a monster might essentially be. And we're actively seeing the Canadian justice system release this individual to await trial until August 8th to be found whether he is guilty or not. Now, typically, if something is in your possession, it means you own it. And in that particular linkage, we then see this particular footage of different reports of students within different universities, once again, being sent particular footage from this one individual. Said footage of child mutilations and on and on and on type nature. Ultimately, what I hope this awakens in you as a Canadian folks is just how the Canadian justice system simply does not truly care for its people. When you would look at the rate that criminals upon first offense, once a repeat offender is repeated so many times, the Canadian government essentially goes, we can't keep you in jail, you just keep repeating, we might as well just keep letting you out, apparently. This is 500,000 photos and videos that which one individual has possession of. Ultimately, in the next 2 months, here's my prophesizing of what this individual might essentially do. In being found guilty or initially arrested, which he was only detained for 7 days, I would argue if he has a repetitive pattern of 500,000 times repeating the same nature, which is of child exploitive nature in sexual behavior, and in said behavior he has himself acquired 500,000 photos and videos. Essentially, he is in desperate times at this particular moment. He was arrested for this crime, and in his acts of desperation, I would argue he is going to commit once again. Except this time, it might be of a much worse event. What might I argue would happen? I would argue this individual is on the path in his desperation. We might see a child go missing within the Okotok, Alberta province area. And in this particular child going missing, I would argue that in my prediction of what this particular individual's behavior is going to lead to is him actualizing the content at which he has acquired. He's going to go to jail anyways. Why would he not just do the crime that he's initially guilty of if he has repeated the pattern 500,000 times? Ultimately, this is a public safety matter, which in the news they might specifically state and list particular circumstances or things he is to abide to, such as not being present within 50 meters of a child space. What does a child space mean? If your child is on the street, this individual is not allowed to be within said 50 meters of the child. 50 meters is not all that big of a distance, however. And in said 50 meters, a small child for a man that has repeated 500,000 times. You might imagine that from 50 meters, this individual might be rather good at picking up from 50 meters. Ultimately, the patterns of the psychological analysis regarding the crime that this individual is bound to commit beyond being convicted upon August 8th. Yet in this meantime, this individual is roaming freely within the Alberta province, specifically Okotok. Now, that might awaken some fear within some of the individuals of the Alberta province. All of a sudden we might see, do we truly want to let our children outside if one individual is being released as a result of exploitive behavior, videos, and photos of 500,000 number of in said possession, which he is found having this possession, yet he was released. Now here's the ultimatum. As a Canadian justice system, what the heck are we doing? We're seeing one man of this particular nature freely walking for the next 2 months, specifically for having committed crimes that threaten the lives of your children. And in the lives of your children, you might see, where do your children go in summer? This individual has until August 8th to be convicted. His first appearance in court will be August 8th, which it will further, essentially, here's how the justice system works in Canada. Upon the individual being arrested, they, according to their depth of crime, you could say if an individual is to murder an individual, they would remain detained for the entire distance until the continuation of their trial, on and on and on, which from the continuation of said trial, imagine if the trial takes place over multiple years. Typically, a trial date, according to the depth of the offense, does not begin until within 1 year upon the initial conviction, the first initial arrest. Beyond this point, you would find that the lawyers may push for a motion to essentially extend the case to gather more evidence in order to finalize the trial. This process can take several years. In this several-year process, upon the sentencing, they actively use several years of that particular process to deduct from your initial sentence, which means if you were to be convicted for 20 years, imagine now the trial took place over 5 to 6, you would only have to serve 14 more years. But in this particular individual, we see a repeat offender, which a murder might be a rather serious crime, but allow me to place this from a 500,000 photos and videos of child sexual exploitive content found within this individual's possession, which from this individual's possession we see him send said particular content to other particular individuals. Ultimately, what I'm saying is that this individual is a serious offender. And in that particular serious offender, you might have repetitive patterns, such as 500,000 repeats. And this individual is walking free within society until their first trial, which is dated August 8th. They have all summer to maybe get the hell out of here or go hiding somewhere, or specifically take a child with them, which they might alienate themselves from society, remake themselves by simply being a man. You could actively find that in men, specifically, the changing of your hair, beard, you name it, you change complete appearance at that point. Said individual might himself isolate from society, and in his own sickness of being said monster, this individual has repeated 500,000 times, and somehow we think that from keeping a law, which he's not escorted continuously by police, but simply placing a law, you're going to stay 50 meters away from all children's spaces. If the outdoors is your children's spaces in summer, what do you think is going to happen to a man that might step 50 meters from a child walking down the street by themselves? He has repeated 500,000 times, and I would argue this individual in desperate need is essentially going to offend again. And in that offense, we're going to see said content of that nature result in that individual knowing he's going to specifically be convicted, yet he's given 2 months within civilization without a continuous police escort, that he is not allowed to leave. He is free walking around. The only abiding rule is he cannot enter within 50 meters of a child's space. This individual, I would argue, in my own analysis, should have been kept behind bars the whole time, which ultimately leads to the conclusion of this video. The Canadian justice system is a failure.